In this episode of We Do A Little, we are joined by Skoti Vitcher. Skoti is a pseudo-anonymous Chad who works in the crypto space doing research on all types of different projects and people. We get into Skoti's intro to cryptocurrency, his passion for all things systems, his favorite builders in the space, relationship advice. We even go down a stimulant rabbit hole, and so much more. As always, this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Andy, D's, and guests may own NFTs discussed.
This is Andy.
Yeah, I'm D's.
I'm Andy, and I'm joined by D's, and then we have our first guest of the season, Skoti. Thank you for being here. A little bit last minute, but we're glad you're here.
Oh, thanks for having me on. It was a nice surprise pulling into Penn Station and getting invited to your podcast. This is great.
Yeah, it was for everyone listening. D's and I were in the Uber over here and had to scramble a little bit because we had a guest mishap, and so we were like, all right, who's going to be near Times Square in about half an hour? Who can we find? But really excited. I in my time in the chats that we've been a part of, I've very much so enjoyed your input. And every once in a while, I'll see you chime in with something, and I'll be like, how the fuck does this guy know about this random thing? So I'm actually very excited to sit down and talk and get to know you a little bit.
Well, my first trick is that I'm old. So I've had more time to accumulate experience and knowledge.
I love that. But yeah, so I guess just kind of getting started, you told us a little bit of this before we got started, but how did you kind of find yourself in random crypto degen group chats and kind of on crypto Twitter and in this whole space?
So I have a friend who did extremely well in the crypto space, not trading. He actually was somebody who built something, and I've got to be extremely careful about what I say about him because he signed NDAs and on and on. But he did very well, and he was trying to get me in, and I'm like, the whole thing's a scam. Leave me out, but good luck. Enjoy losing your money, which is pretty typical for people on the outside, right? Which now that I've been on the inside for a bit is pretty typical for people on the inside as well. So he was the one that got me interested. And then he was able to pull off something cleanly, right? Actually delivered a product that was bought. There was no scam involved. So I'm like, there might be actually legitimate businesses that can be done in this space. This was around the time, this was actually just before the most recent crash started. And it's when there was, I guess the market cap at the time was around 2 trillion if you look at all crypto assets combined. So that's a significant amount of money. That's what got me first interested. I myself probably bring very limited things to the space, but I know people that could bring huge things to the space. Mm-hmm. And that's what my real life job is dealing with those people as vague as I possibly can. And so a few of them had talked to me over the years about it. And I said, same thing I've told everybody since 2008. It's a scam. Stay away. So I've been giving terrible advice since 2008. And that probably deprived several people from making a lot of money. So that's basically what I got in for, was to just do some due diligence, find out who are the scammers, who are the real players, is there any real business application in this space that can be utilized. And that's how it all started.
So what has been kind of in that intro and entry and due diligence phase, what's been the most surprising thing that you've kind of stumbled upon or thing you realized that you didn't expect?
It was far dirtier in here than I thought. Mm-hmm. I was expecting 90% scams, 10% real. And I've adjusted that to about 97% scams, 3% real. And I'd say 2% of that 3% are what I call honest scams, which is basically just, they didn't mean to rip anyone off. There was no intention to do it, but it was a poorly thought out idea. They overestimated their abilities. There was just simple bad luck. Somebody decided to leave or whatever, and the project failed as a result of that. But as far as well thought out, actually useful things, it's 1% or lower. 1% actually might even be high, but all I needed was something, right?
Yeah.
There just needed to be something that I could point other people at and say, okay, ignore all this other garbage, focus on this. So
yeah, no, that's a really good point. I feel like something that you hear a lot in a lot of the mainstream kind of criticism of crypto in general is most of it, like almost all of it, is scams. So like it's bad. But even like being able to acknowledge like, okay, maybe there is a lot of stuff that's not great or stupid or just not well thought out. But like that one, like the small amount that actually is good, there is some really interesting stuff happening.
Yeah, and that's what I've found. And bear in mind, I went into it completely neutral. Like I would say slightly negative at the start, but when I look at anything, even something that I'm really bearish on, I completely push emotions to the side. I have this whatever, I guess it's a magic ability to just completely disconnect emotion and say, okay, what's actually good in here? What's useful in here? And the underlying technology is brilliant. The open ledger, I think, is philosophically important. I don't know how much that's going to resonate with the average consumer. It may be one of these things that it takes time for them to understand why it's important, but it definitely doesn't. When they're looking at a list of features and it's like, oh, open ledger, they're like, oh my god, I got to have this. Like that's not happening. So they're far more interested in what does the transaction cost? You know, how fast is this thing? How reliable is it? You know, things like that of that nature. How useful is it? So I saw that the underlying tech was like absolutely brilliant at its core, but it has attracted a really significant percentage of scammers. And I was around and in the industry during the Web 1.0 days. Like I've always been in technology, and they had, I would say, you definitely had a higher than background noise level of scammers, but nothing like this. I mean, it was 10% scammers back then, you know, but it was nothing on the order of magnitude that this is.
That's kind of an interesting place to go down. I think like the Web 1 rabbit hole, early on you mentioned like you have experience, you're older, you've seen this stuff play out. Can we go back to the history of your Web 1 days a little bit? Like not getting too specific, but just like generally maybe what you majored in college and then kind of what your early career looked like. Cause I'm really curious what brought you to here.
That part's a bit counterintuitive. It makes sense once I say it, but I was a biochem major and I had a minor in computer science.
Okay.
I thought biochem I still think biochem is unbelievably interesting. I think it's going to be one of the next huge growth industries once they figure out several key things, like how to not kill people while they're editing things inside their body. But
important things to iron out.
Yeah, we can get back to that later. So when I got out of school, you know, this was mid 90s, and this is when the tech boom was starting, and it was just it was a simple income question. It was I either go into IT and start at 80 grand, or I become a dude spinning centrifuges in a lab for 30 grand, and it was just there is no decision to be made, right? Like IT, it is, and that's how I started.
Nice. I also started in IT, but it wasn't through the same decision making. It was like, oh, I can't pass computer science because I'm not the smartest person in the room, and I might need a degree that doesn't have such a strong math and science backbone. So I also ended up in the IT field, but not because of opportunity. It was more just because I'm a little slow. But going back to your college days, what made you so interested in that major at first? Like growing up, what made you interested in I already forget it,
biochemistry.
Biochem. Yeah, like in my head I was biomolecular chemistry.
So I think the underlying curiosity is probably the same thing that got me into computers. It's how does this thing work? It's just that in one case, it's the thing is us, and the other thing is, you know, a box of electronics. But the underlying curiosity remains the same. And it was, I don't know, probably like anybody else, you know, like why can't we just change the components of a human and build them differently? Like it just seemed to make sense. So I got into that field to figure out if it really is possible, and it is. But the degree of complexity is obviously it's both the degree of complexity and the risk is far higher because you're dealing with people. So, and there's billions every year spent on projects looking to do that exact thing. Like, at the more superficial level, it's, so look at it if you look at it purely from an economic standpoint, what's the total fake breast market worth globally, right?
It's got to be huge.
Billions, right? I don't know the exact number, but I know it's well into the billions.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially if you include all of the like attention and advertising that people also get alongside of like just even outside of just the augmentation itself, like everything that kind of goes along with it.
Yeah. So yeah, like residual industries that are based on like how many wet t-shirt contests have been gamed by
exactly
by better surgeons? I don't know.
The hard-hitting questions.
I know.
As a young man,
I
you're just trying to figure out. Like,
stay up at night thinking about these things. But imagine you could go to everyone that was in that market, say, hey, forget these fake breasts. I can give you real breasts. We're going to inject you, and 6 months from now or whatever, you're going to grow exactly what you want, and they're yours. They're 100% yours. It's your cells. It's your everything. No surgery required, and they're going to have the benefit of being actually real. They're going to whatever. Carry that out to the contact lens industry. If you can fix an eyeball at the cellular level, what is that worth to someone? Like, hey, forget glasses and contacts for the rest of your life. We're going to inject you, and you're just going to grow a new eyeball. Or they'll grow it outside and insert it, however the process would ultimately go. But you could basically snatch who knows what, $1 trillion? Again, at its furthest fleshed out point. Where you can manipulate the human body as we do, say, a car, and it's what people want. So you're giving them what they want. It's just that, and we are giving it to them, but we're doing it with pretty crude tools, right? Like, oh, you want blue eyes? Well, here's a blue contact. Although they got one where they actually laser out the melanin in brown eyes.
Oh my!
Yeah, and it turns blue. Because blue is not a real actually color. Like there's no blue. Chromatophore. Can't remember what the correct term is, but basically it's not there. It's the lack of melanin in the eye, and it creates an optical illusion of blue. And then the other colors are basically, if you have a very thin layer, you get green, and then you get the hazels and whatever, and it's based on the amount of melanin in the eye.
Makes sense as why blue's like the recessive one, because with both lacks, then you get the blue. But if you have any mix, it's not blue.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting. And so have you continued, I assume you've continued to follow along with the space over the years, but just haven't been as involved in it kind of professionally?
Oh yeah, casually I keep up with it. I read a lot of the stuff. I still take classes every now and again just to make sure that my brain's not completely rotting and that I can still understand the stuff that I'd studied.
What's the best way to keep up with biochem? Like, just as I'm curious, is like if you go into like a news source, is there like a Financial Times but for biochem?
I'd say the New England Journal of Medicine, but they're more on medical treatments itself. You're sort of getting the things that are done at the end. I just focus on a particular thing that I'm curious in as opposed to biochem field as a whole, because you couldn't. It's too big at this point. So if there's one specific thing that you're interested about, you just do that, and you find everything online. Like I don't even know that subscribing to anything makes sense anymore.
Yeah,
like even the paywalled stuff comes out free, right? Like it's just a matter of time before, and time meaning minutes or hours at most days before the exact same article is going to pop up somewhere.
Yeah.
So you can find pretty much whatever you want just with a Google search.
Yeah, we're at this age where you need to be able to curate your content because you have this fire hose that's aimed at you all day, every day with stimuli, whether it's about biochem, crypto, whatever field you care about. And it's like that ability to curate and be like, no, like I only am focused on this one thing is really important in any field because you have so much shit basically just thrown at you. And I find that, I think in the crypto space in particular, it's like, for me at least, it's harder to focus because I think maybe over the last few months it's been easier to focus, but like the last 2 years or so have been really hard to focus for me. Like I can't just like sit down and be like, oh yeah, I'm focused on this project for 2 hours. I'm going to do research on it. It's like I get a 30-minute chunk and that's it. And then my brain is like, all right, you got to go like FOMO into something right now. You need to open up an app. You need to read a message. You need to do a thing. You can't just like sit here and focus on this. And I feel like it's like a superpower now.
I just want to quickly revisit what I said, just because I'm like real time thinking about how what I said is going to be interpreted. I did preface it by saying at a superficial level, and that's why I was covering things like breast implants and eye color. Obviously, the more important things are cancers,
yes, congenital
defects that can be repaired, and on and on. I just wanted to have that on record so that people weren't thinking like that's really what you do.
No, but it's a good thought
experiment.
Yeah, but it's also interesting because, like, in a lot of ways, hopefully the demand to have like better breast implants can kind of like pseudo fund the search for curing cancer with all these different things and all of that, because there's like a lot of people who are more than happy to pay. If you're able to figure out how to do the breast implant thing, those people could basically fund all the research to do the other stuff.
Oh yeah. My guess is it's going to be 3 tiers. It's going to be the first one, because you always get social pushback, right? It's happened with every single thing that's ever been invented ever. There's, hey, here's a new thing. I hate it. You know, and that always happens no matter what the thing is, good, bad, or ugly. The first thing is going to be medical, right? Mm-hmm. Because if someone comes along and says, hey, I've got a way to edit your DNA and get rid of cystic fibrosis, which is actually one of the ones they think is going to be first up, because it's none of this is simple. From a gene editing standpoint, it's relatively simple to fix that. Who's going to push back? Mm-hmm. Like who's going to be the one that stands up in the crowd and saying, I have a problem with curing that 7-year-old of cystic fibrosis because you're opening a Pandora's box. And like, yeah. Really, what Pandora's box? The one that includes a bunch of dead kids inside? Like, I don't. So that I think is the first fight, and it's an easy win. Mm-hmm. I think after that is going to be aesthetics, because you're definitely crossing into a more concerning area philosophically, where it's like, okay, now you're just going to build the kids you want or the person you want, and my answer is, well, yeah. Like, why would I want it any other way? You know. And then the third, obviously, is when you get into actual abilities, right? Like cognitive abilities. And if they ever get to that level, then I'm more on the let's slow down camp, because you can do pretty awful things. You can do great things, but you can also, let's make a subservient class that just, then it gets really dystopian at that point.
And
combine that with AI. You're just like, fuck.
So I have no knowledge of any of this, so this is a dumb question, let me know. But how, like, on the scale of feasible is, like, actually changing people's cognitive abilities through these types of things?
Oh, it's definitely doable. Like that's not even a question. Okay. Like they've known this for years. They've known it before, just by virtue of injury, where they've had injuries obviously take people's cognitive abilities away, but on rare cases, they've had injuries increase people's cognitive abilities. They've had tumors give people the ability to play the piano, and head injuries give people the ability to do advanced mathematics. It's 1 in a million shot, but every once in a while, it gets hit just right, and you can do it. So basically, if you can mimic whatever that's done, hey, make this part of the brain grow more or less or whatever, more tightly packed with neurons or whatever the particular formula is for what you're going after. Yeah, it can be done.
Yeah, it's creepy. Yeah, I could definitely see the pushback in the middle section as well, of like the aesthetics and stuff. I could see a lot of like the religious right, and some, I grew up in the church, and the whole idea of like, oh, people are made in the image of God, and so if you're going against that, I could see people having a big issue with that.
For religion, I don't like. I'm an atheist, but I've never had a problem with. I'm agnostic, actually. Yeah, I'm not an atheist. Like, if somebody came along and was able to prove that God exists, I'd be like, that's okay. So God exists. Like, I don't really feel strongly one way or another. But I've not really seen much. Like, I don't know that any of this disproves God. It can disprove a religion more than it can disprove a God, right? Like, you can look at some religion that explicitly states a very specific thing, and you're like, well, I can prove that very specific thing isn't true. So that's good enough for disproving a religion, or parts of a religion anyway. But it doesn't really negate the entire concept of a God. It also depends on how malleable your idea of a God is, right? Like, if you just view, let's take the purely scientific view, which is the Big Bang. That's the leading one, which was originally created by a priest.
Really?
Yep. Lemaitre? George Lemaitre? I'd have to look it up and make sure. He was a Jesuit priest, and he's the one that conceived it. And even he said, he goes, this does not disprove. He's like, nothing I'm showing here disproves the idea. And I actually agree with him. I'm like, you can't, like, none of this stuff actually disproves God, because all you're doing is you're proving that there's a set of rules. Mm-hmm. So who's to say that if God exists, he didn't build a universe that had rules? So and again, I'm not hung up either way. I have no problem with religious people. I have no problem with irreligious people. My judgment's completely different. It's like, are you a piece of shit or not? And that's really all I care about.
Yeah.
No, I think that's really important. I think I agree with a lot of what you just said. I think for me, maybe the roles itself, like, are the God. in a sense, like the rules of the universe.
Yeah, and that's what I've sort of settled on is like if you view the universe as the God, it's just that it's not the dude on the golden throne with
giant
hair and beard, like
a trident or something.
Like if that part's not important to you, and then the universe actually is. They did create you. It did it in an odd way, like a non-human way, but I don't know. It's not really looking. It's not asking us for its permission anyway.
Going off the cognitive ability point of the conversation, I think Andy was talking in the chat before this, and they mentioned that you might have an interesting nootropic stack as part of your regimen. Is that a thing?
Oh, that was as a joke. I mean, I do use Adderall. Like I was diagnosed way before it was fashionable. And again, it's one of these things that's a generational difference. I don't think anybody cares anymore if you're diagnosed with ADD, right? Or ADHD. It wasn't even ADHD back then. It was still ADD. Because I think the DSM-4, the medical thing, I think it was at 4, it was still ADD, and then at 5 it switched or somewhere around there. But I was still in the area where ADHD wasn't a thing yet. It was still ADD. And it was very specifically something you did not want. Like there was no gray area. You did not want it. Your parents didn't want you to have it. The doctors didn't want to prescribe the medicine for it because it was giving stimulants to kids.
Yeah.
Everyone was against it. So like if you got a diagnosis back then, you absolutely had it, right?
Yeah, like you needed
it. Like you had to be an edge case before they would even really consider like, okay, you actually need this.
Now it's like candy.
Now they overprescribe.
You're like, I can't focus. And they're like, here's some extended release Adderall.
Enjoy. Yeah, I don't know. So I basically fought it. I took one Ritalin tab.
Okay.
Hated it. Couldn't stand it. I was 14 at the time.
What about it didn't you like?
Dry mouth. Like it was, and I didn't. Here's what I learned later. Like I didn't really. It made me feel different, but I didn't really know what to do with it. And what I always tell people, it was like the first time you're drunk, right? I feel differently, and I'm experiencing things differently. But what do I do with this feeling, right?
Yeah.
And it was sort of that. So I stopped taking it entirely, and I went through the rest of school. I went through college, first part of my career, without it. And I still don't know if I've probably hamstringed myself. I would guess, but overall, but I do think it's important to not immediately, even in real cases, don't immediately start with the pharmaceuticals because people will figure out compensating mechanisms on their own. Mm-hmm. You'll still need that tablet to get over the goal line, but you're going to figure a lot of stuff out on your own, like meditation, exercise, like all these other things that can help it. Mm-hmm. But I mean, nothing's really as effective as a tab of something that's analogous to crystal meth. But I still think it's important. So I got to a point in my life where I had gone back to school to get my master's, had a wife and 2 kids. Life was really full, and I'm like, I was really struggling with it. So I'm like, maybe it's time to go back to the doc, and it works as advertised. I mean, I can't complain. It's Adderall now. I'm not on Ritalin. Yeah. And I'd say the first 3 days that I tried it, it was the same. I'm like, I feel different, but I don't really know what to do with it. And then I eventually figured out, I'm like, all right, okay, let me, I had like 700 unread email, and I was like, all right, Saturday morning, let me see if email appeals to me for some reason. And it did.
And it did.
And I was like, wow, this is not bad.
You're like, the number's going down.
Right.
Yes.
Like, look, they're all.
The dopamine, like it's almost at 0.
Yeah, something that I've considered. If I had to guess, I'm somewhat ADHD at least. My fiance thinks I'm definitely ADHD. And so something that I've considered a few times of like at least going to like check it out and try it. I've never even like, and I feel like at this point it's weird to be a 28-year-old who hasn't at least casually taken some Adderall. But I've never
tried it in college or anything.
No.
Okay.
And so I have no idea like what the effect would be, but my focus can definitely wane at times.
I was the type to like go to my roommate who had a prescription, and it's 48 hours before the final, and I haven't studied, and I'm just like, yo, like I need some help, man. Can I just get 1 or 2 of those for this final? And then I did that for a couple of years, only using them around midterms and finals, and I haven't used it since I graduated.
And that's probably smart. Like,
I have a very addictive personality. Even little things like just getting into a ritual or routine. Like once I start doing it, like I get addicted to it. So if that became part of my routine, like, oh, I take the Adderall and then I drink the coffee and then I smoke the weed and then I sit in front of the screen, like that would compound over 6 months, 1 year, whatever, to be something I don't need it to be. So like I stay away from all stimulants aside from the caffeine, just because I know my personality would destroy me.
If you go all the way down the rabbit hole of legal stims, there's something called disoxin.
Okay.
And when I say literally, I mean chemically, it is identical to crystal meth.
Okay.
There is pharmaceutical grade crystal meth that they give to people that are so far gone, like nothing else will work. That exists.
And so, how? I guess my question is, how did they get there?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's highly regulated. So, like, the doctor has to absolutely believe that nothing else will work on you. And if you can convince a doctor that that's true, you can get some legal crystal meth.
That's wild.
It's kind of like a lobotomy or something, but in the like today, where you have to just convince them, like, this is the only thing that's going to fix me. If you don't give me legal crystal meth, like, I am gonna
I'll be a mess. I don't know what I'm gonna do.
That's really
I might have to. I don't think I could keep a straight face during that act of patient doctor where I am like, yeah, doc, like I've tried everything and I really need this. I think the last quote unquote nootropic I was experimenting with was kratom, and I didn't really get much from it. And then there was also, I'm forgetting the name, but like in the 2018 bear market, modafinil. That was another one. I went down that rabbit hole of like, let me order some of these from, I think, India Pharmaceuticals, get them shipped over and take them.
What were they supposed to do?
It was supposed to be like a more mild Adderall is what people were talking about. It was like a crypto Twitter thing in 2018 where it was just like cheap, get it from India. It's like basically free, gives you energy. I took maybe a dozen of them, and I was like, I don't really understand how this is different than coffee. Like, I would still sweat. I would still have a extended, like, 4+ hour long energy burst, but, like, it didn't feel much different than caffeine or coffee to me. I mean, caffeine is in coffee, but I haven't really messed with them since, though.
They used to sell this stuff. They still sell the product, but without question, they've changed the ingredients. There used to be something called mini thins that you could buy at truck stops. You sold it to truckers. Mini thins.
Sounds like candy.
Yeah, it sounds like it'd be like a wafer, like a really thin wafer or something.
I think it was sold as an antihistamine, if I remember correctly. And I took it once because I had to drive from North Carolina to Miami. This is when I was in school. And I was just complaining, like, man, I'm really tired. I just finished finals. I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to make this drive at once. Maybe I'll stop in Jacksonville. A friend of mine who knew about this stuff, he's like, hey, if you get tired, go to a truck stop. And he's like, near the register, they're going to have this thing called mini thins. It's like a little paper packet. Like, take one of those. He's like, it comes with like 6 pills. Take all the pills. And
take all the pills in one set.
Yeah. And he's like, you'll be fine. All right, cool. So right around, the north part of Florida, I start nodding off. And I'm like, I found a truck stop. I was going to go get this stuff. Not really expecting much. And I was awake for 48 hours, and didn't even feel tired. Like, I mean, it didn't. And I don't know what the ingredient was. I'm sure whatever it was is outlawed now. But yeah, it was really good stuff.
So it's like when you're at the store and you see the 5-hour energies, and you're like, fuck, like I need like 8 of those. Then you just look over and there's like the mini thin, and you're like, no, this is it.
No, just the mini thin,
I need
please.
the 48-hour energy. Yeah.
I don't need all those calories, just the mini thins.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds not ideal. I mean, I don't think I've been up for more than 30 hours in a row. About 30 is my hard stop.
Yeah, I think I've done like 36, and that was like my max.
I have an abnormally low sleep requirement, and I always have. I sleep 4 to 6 hours.
Oh, wow.
And that's it my whole life. Never changes. And maybe that's why it affected me. Like, it just amplified that ability. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the gene sequence, but it's one of the ones that they've discovered basically what the gene does. And there are particular gene sequences that do give people lower sleep requirements. And depending on the exact positioning of the alleles, it's like you can have this person's going to require the most sleep to be rested, and this person's going to require the least sleep. And then you've got several configurations in between. And mine are all totally maxed to the needs less sleep side.
That's so interesting.
I'm jealous. Definitely jealous. If I get less than 6, I feel like I may as well be useless.
Yeah, like I can do 4 for days in a row. It'll creep up on me eventually. But if I sleep over 6, I generally feel terrible. I get that oversleep feeling.
Yep. No, I feel that at 8. It's like anything more than 8. And I'm like, oh, I didn't need that. But it's interesting with sleep. I feel like, everybody wants to sleep less. Like, I don't really know people who are like, oh, I want to sleep more.
Oh, if I could shut it off entirely, I would do it in a second. If
really?
I could just be awake until I died,
yeah,
I'd absolutely
100%. Do it. I mean, you just get more time.
Yeah.
And like, time is all we have at the end of the day. And it's like,
yeah, I guess as long as you like feel good. The core thing that you still feel good while sleeping less. But yeah, it's funny that you said that because I definitely have noticed, like for me, I don't need more than 8 hours. And if I get more than 8 hours, like same as D's, I start to feel like weird or just kind of off.
Yeah.
But then my fiance needs like almost 10 hours of
yes.
sleep a night. And so it's funny, like she's like, oh, I want to go to bed at the same time. I'm like, okay, then that means I'm getting out of bed 2 hours earlier than you because we just don't sleep the same amount of time. It's not like I can just,
I'm not going to lay for 2 hours and stare at the ceiling.
I can't just sleep for 10 hours. My body won't do it.
Have the same problem.
Yeah.
It's a point of contention because it's like she wants to be on the same schedule, but we are just biologically not on the same schedule. So it's the same thing. It's like, well, I can go to bed 2 or 3 hours after you and we can wake up together. Or you can just sleep in till whenever, but like at 8 or 9, I'm up and you're left for yourself.
Yeah, my wife was the same way because she liked the idea of we're gonna go to bed together, we're gonna wake up at the same time. And I'm like,
that's never happened.
Like, it's not. And I'm like, of all the people it's not gonna happen with, it's me more than most. Like, I'm like, I have a I don't know. I can't even if I like tried to schedule myself to go to sleep at 10 because I've tried to do this my whole life. I'm like, it will not work. Like, I will just go to sleep when I go to sleep. And I have really not much say over it. It's just when I feel like going to sleep and then when I feel like waking up. It's got some nice side effects. Like, I don't use alarm clocks. Never use an alarm clock.
I don't either.
Like, I know for a fact, I'm like, if I go to bed at this time, I will definitely wake up before blah. And it's never failed.
I still use the alarm clock. It's more just like a scheduling thing. I know if I wake up before the alarm, I'm like, oh, I have free time. And if I wake up to the alarm, it's like, oh, like I need to get going like right now. I feel like going back to being married with kids, I feel like that's something Andy and I are maybe approaching faster than other people in space, but like we're getting close to there. I'd like to dive in on like advice or like any tips.
You could have not asked a worse person for
really?
Advice. Like, give one let me just drink water.
No, right? drink some water. I feel like it's something that's been on my mind a lot lately. And Andy just talking about Allie and our wives situation. It's something that I'm always listening for good advice.
So again, this goes back to how I'm just innately wired. And I learned early on, for whatever reason, not to fight your natural instincts for things because it invariably ends badly. At least when it comes to like personal affairs and things like that, right? Like, I'm not saying like don't fight your fear to go swimming. You should definitely fight that fear. But for things like this, it's you should probably go with your gut. So I never had that feeling that some people have where I need to get married. I need to have kids. I wasn't against it, but I was really neutral. I was like, if it happens, it happens. And if not, well, I'm fine either way. But I think, again, it goes back to how I'm wired because my mom will tell you to this day, she says, even when you were a baby, you could be left alone for hours and you wouldn't even cry. Like being alone just never bothered you. And it carried over. So I was never, and my sister's completely opposite, right? She always wants to be with somebody. Mm-hmm. And so I've seen that psychology play out, right? And I don't know that either extreme is good. I would definitely pick my extreme over the other, without question. But it probably makes me a bit cold in relationships, maybe colder than I should be, just because I don't really need the level of interaction that other people need. So maybe, I don't know, I could probably dial it to the right a tiny bit if I had the ability, but. So because of that, I was never in a rush. I just didn't care. And again, I wasn't against it. I was like, sure, if the ideal girl falls from the heavens, I have no problem with marrying her and having kids. So I was single until my late 30s and loved it. Like, I had a great single life. I traveled almost constantly with my company because it was an international corporation and the job required loads of travel. So I was constantly moving around, and it was just a series of short-term relationships, which was fine with me. It was the way to do it. Making good money, didn't have kids, didn't have anything that was draining it. So, you know, I when I wasn't working, I was able to afford a fun lifestyle. So I had a great time being single. Like, I wasn't one of the sad boys, you know, like, oh, I just want to be loved. That really
you're not
wasn't me.
incel posting on crypto Twitter.
No, not at all. I read all that stuff because it was like the humor that comes out of that community is top shelf.
Do you have any body pillows?
Oh, it's so good.
It's amazing.
It's really, really good. But no, I was never one of them. So yeah, I was in Monaco because the company I worked for at the time was based in Monaco, and it had to do with the maritime industry. And they had the Monaco Yacht Show, and they had they have all sorts of entertainers out, but they had a group of dancers out, and I was there, and there was this one just stunning dancer, and I was like, and I'm really not that guy. Like, I'm super picky. I don't feel like compulsion to go hit on anybody, but this time I was this one I must meet. And so went up, started talking to her. We spent the weekend in Monaco together, but just like really, really casually, you know, just going to restaurants. I was much older than she was, for starters. But we were friends for probably a year. It was obviously we kept in touch, and because I traveled so often, and I was in the areas that she was in, we would still visit. And then probably a year in, we started dating. Dated for about a year, and then I told her, I'm like, this travel will kill this relationship. Like you can't do this long distance. It isn't like 100%. It's got 100% death rate. Like, long distance relationships over a long enough timeline always kill
They
it.
suck.
Right? They do. They're awful. So I'm like, you can pull it off for a short period of time, but if you're trying to do this permanently, it's not going to work. And she agreed, so we got married.
Just like that.
No, just like
It's
that.
just like, I'm done. Was it like on her end, okay, I'm done with this, like, I'm gonna go with you and travel with you, and, you know?
No, I had to do it on my side. I had to quit my job as well.
Oh.
For the same reason.
Nice.
Because I couldn't, it was the same thing. I'm like, I can't just leave her home and just bail all the time. So,
But the feeling was strong enough that you're like, I've been doing this traveling shit for 15 plus years at this point.
Yes,
like, I am ready to go on to that next phase. This is the one. Like,
yeah, it was. And it was an all-in bet. I could.
They have to be. I feel like you can't have a relationship that isn't an all-in bet, or at least like it has to be an all-in bet for both parties. Like, if it's an all-in bet for somebody and then someone else is like, I have it out,
hold some chips back.
it's like, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it has. So far, it's been great. It's been 12 years, and it's been good. I can't complain.
That's awesome.
And
But also this, like, I don't know how to. It's one of these obvious pieces of advice that once you say it, it's obvious and dumb, really, because how do you do it? Make sure you actually want to get married, but how do you make sure unless you've already done it, right?
Yeah.
But I guess maybe the better advice is make sure you're with the right person. That's because marriage is really ultimately just it's a document. It doesn't actually do anything. I even think that it's weird that we have to ask government approval to get married. There's just something odd about it. But it doesn't really change anything. Like, either if it's a person that you truly care about and that you truly get along with, you're going to be fine.
Yeah.
With or without a piece of paper that says so.
Yeah, not to speak for you, but like, I feel like you have to feel like you're married.
Oh yeah. Well, it was funny. So my fiance and I have been together for coming up on 9 years. So we started dating sophomore year of college, and we got engaged in December of this past year. And everyone afterwards was like, "Oh my God, does it feel amazing? How's engaged life?" And I was like, "We already live together.
Yeah.
We have pets. We already have a life together. Like, literally nothing is different." And so for a long time, I was like, I was pretty slow to propose, not because I didn't know if I wanted to be with her. I was just like, I don't really like, there's no need to. I'd rather save up and have more money and be able to have a bigger and nicer wedding and get you a better ring and all these different things. So I was like pretty similar to you in that sense. I think I never felt like the certificate of marriage mattered that much. And like, I had to, get married and have kids and do that whole thing before a certain age or anything.
from a risk proposal standpoint, marriage is a terrible idea, right?
From risk management, it's really bad.
It's got very little upside, right? Like I'm not saying girls very little upside. Girls have tremendous amounts of upside, or I should say a significant other has tremendous amounts of
the
potential
oral
upside.
relationship has a lot of upside.
But the contract of marriage in and of itself has extraordinarily little amounts of upside and massive downsides. Like it doesn't really make much sense.
50% of it's gone.
Yeah, when it's like
now that is like custody over your kids, and I mean it gets really ugly.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna get married, and again, it's obvious stupid advice that you can't really know, but make sure it's the right person because the downside of marriage is horrendous.
Did you, if you don't mind me asking, were your parents together your whole childhood, or were they split?
No, they divorced when I was 3.
Okay, mine divorced when I was 1, and I think like growing up with them split made me realize like how important the marriage measure twice, cut once concept was, because it was like, oh, like if you fuck this up, like your kids just split and like on an island with one parent while the other parent, in my case, I was very lucky that both my parents kept it super amicable and like they did what was best for me and put their differences aside. But there's other times where it's just not like that. Like the kid becomes a bargaining chip. It's a whole thing. And
they never did that with us. And I'll even say this, and this, I don't know, this shocks people, but I think it's true. I think my dad knew what he was doing. Like, I think he knew I'm a bad dad. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I'm going to get out before I never resented him, ever. Like a lot of kids feel like abandoned, and they feel, not 1 second of my life did I ever resent him for doing it. He was a very huge guy, a big dude, horrible temper. I mean, awful temper. Never hit us or anything like that. But it was one of those people, it's like if somebody lets a pit bull off the leash in the room, even if the pit bull doesn't bite anyone, you're like, why is this thing? I don't want to be in the room with this thing.
Yeah.
And it was that vibe. And I think he understood that. And he said, I'm just going to do damage if I stay. So he left. And I never judged the guy for it. It was fine.
I feel like in my case, and like I apologize to my mom if she's listening to this at some point in the future, but like growing up with my mom like made me understand why my dad left. It was like, oh, like that wouldn't have worked, like period. So it happens like that. Like same thing, like no harsh judgment. Like, I'm still close to both my parents now, given everything that happened, but it was just like, yeah, like I understand why at a young age she was like, yeah, this is not going to work. And it worked out for the better.
Yeah. I mean, again, divorce just has it's got a negative connotation. And I'm like, no, man, divorce is magical sometimes. Divorce is the best thing sometimes. It's like, obviously the ideal is parents are very much in love. They love having kids and you have a nice, happy family. And I wish that for everybody. But unfortunately, that just doesn't happen for everyone. So
no, for sure.
So that versus, nope, sorry, you got married, stay in this miserable relationship and make everybody unhappy for the rest of your days. That just seems
that's
like
even worse. Just
far
rip
worse
the
option.
Band-Aid off.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And so I guess thinking more about your family and stuff, how has it been kind of as you've continued working? And I feel like if you're trying to do research and like learn about the crypto space, it never shuts off.
It's hard.
Has that been a challenge for you in like adjusting to that?
Yes. I mean, the advantage I have is I have a technical background, so I'm able to absorb the material faster than most people. But yeah, I've got 2 kids, which are huge time sinks, right? Good time sinks, but they still require a lot of attention. I have my wife, I've got a job that's more than a full-time job. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so the thing that saves me is my low sleep requirement. So after everybody goes to bed, I'm up for 3-4 hours until 2 a.m. studying this stuff and going into Twitter spaces and meeting people and all the things that you have to do to truly understand the space, in toto.
Yeah. And so when did you actually start? I know you said this was like
March.
Okay, March of this year.
Yep.
And so when you like kind of, did you have a bit of a game plan of what you wanted to do to get involved and all of that, or just kind of freeball it?
No, I look at it 2 ways. Well, I had an unfair advantage, I suppose, because I knew someone who'd already done all the work and was deep into the world and really understood it. So I sort of got speed ran through the first part, right? As somebody who's just, off the street and who doesn't know anybody who's in the space, they've got to find out the hard way, right? You've got to just jump in and you join spaces and there's a 99% chance they're trying to rip your money off, and I didn't have to do any of that, right? I sort of got immediately introduced to people who knew exactly what was going on, and they could explain things at a very deep level. So that helped tremendously. But there's only so much you can get from a chat, right? Like you still have to actually go read the white papers, which it's dry, but it's interesting.
It's definitely dry. You got in March. This is crazy. Like if I was to, like, drop a pin in my journey in this March and then like trying to think about where the space was, it was a crazy time.
Yeah.
It was like basically the top, right? Or I mean,
it was like right when just before it crashed. Like I mean, not even just before, it was like right as it was starting to crash.
Were you researching like the Terra ecosystem at all as you started? I feel like earlier you mentioned 97% of the things in this space are scams. 3% are legit things, and then maybe of that 3%, a lot of those are honest scams or poor mechanism design. I feel like Terra might be one of the ones where you look at it in hindsight and you're like, yeah, this is pretty poor mechanism design. Like,
so I was in and paying attention when it all, probably a couple of weeks before it all started to fall to pieces. And the only reason, it's not like I had some tremendous amount of insight. It's just that there was so much noise being made about it. I'm like, I should probably go read this,
it's a risk-free 20% APY. How can you ignore this?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So one of the things I picked up where I was like, I go back to, so again, I was around for the 2008 housing crash, and just by virtue of bad luck, I suppose, both my mother and sister were looking for new houses at the time.
Oh,
and I'm not a real estate person whatsoever. I'm not a finance person, really. I mean, I understand a bit about it, but I'm not a pro by any stretch. And I told him, I'm like, look, I don't have, I have just gut instinct on this and a little bit of logic, but don't buy. I'm like, this is going to pop. Like, there is no, and I'm like, here's my reasoning. I'm like, you cannot inflate the price of something 5% every year for infinity. Like, it just doesn't work that way. Like, the math will eventually stop making sense. And when it stops making sense, all this comes crashing down, which it did. They didn't listen to me, and they both bought new and like immediately lost, like 25% of the value of their investments. They were buying it to live in, so it was less impactful. So it recovered. Actually, it more than recovered because they were both in South Florida. So that recently, the real estate market there went through the roof, right? So now at this point, they've probably made 100% on the purchase.
But at the time, it was like, oh wow, we're
at
down
the time it was like, oh wow,
33%.
This turned out as a bad idea. So so you see that here, right? I was like, okay, if somebody's paying you 20% annual yields, for that math to make sense, they've got to be making that more than that elsewhere. Like, if they're paying you out 20%, they got to be making, and again, I don't know what the correct metric would be, but it would say 30%, right? Because they're going to need a percentage of that to run their business, and they're going to need on and on and on. And I'm like, the only thing that pays this well is just because there's heaps of blind money being thrown into this space. That's why they pay these yields. And I'm like, eventually this will stop. You'll run out of money, or people will get wise to it, and that's what happened. I think the whole thing, it's one of those things. I've said it before. I think Web3 is going to be remembered for. It won't be the technical contributions, because they're good, but they're limited, right? It will be remembered for the perfection of the scam, because these are unbelievably well thought out scams. They really are. Like they're so good, even after the fact, during the post-mortem, you're like, I can't tell if this was a scam or not. Like, this is, like, gut instinct tells you this was definitely a scam. Like, everything gut instinct tells you Lunaterra was a scam, right?
It's not good gut instincts.
Yeah.
But it's like, when you look at it, you're like, what's the damning evidence versus just a very poorly implemented thing that some guy believed in?
Yeah.
I think it's a scam, but
it was bad when I had alerts on a Twitter account that was called like the MIM refresh Twitter accounts for Magic Internet Money. And there was a Terra pool where you could lever up your Magic Internet Money, which is the abracadabra stable, and then throw it into UST in the degen box. And you were getting like 70% with 10x leverage on your UST position.
On stablecoins.
But there was a period where it was so ridiculous. I was at a grocery store, and I got the alert that said like $500 million has been opened in this pool and you can fill it up. And I was like waiting for this alert because I'm like, oh, I gotta get like a very sizable amount of money in here. And I was like, okay, I'm going to drive home and go put my money in. And a 20-minute drive from the grocery store to my house, like that 500 million was already taken. Like it was already full. And it was just like February-ish, maybe January, February time. And it was just like, there's that much capital on the sideline that is just blindly throwing it into this safe degen box that is levering up UST. And it was like super competitive to get into, to the point where people had bots that anytime there was a replenish, they would just fill it automatically. And that was when it started to click for me. Like, I probably actually should be like not in this. Yeah. And then one night I was really stoned at 2 a.m. reading a Twitter thread that explained the mechanics of Luna and Terra. And I was like not fully understanding it, but I was so paranoid because I was a combination of high and it was late that I just took all my money out.
Well, who was the guy that called it? Somebody called it a couple months in advance.
I feel like there were a few like Twitter threads that went around in Q1.
Yeah.
But there was one dude that like nailed it. Like, and that's the one that Do Kwon made fun of the guy because
Oh yeah, it was GCR,
something like that.
Yeah. GCR, Rebirth, or
yeah, he's like the top trader on is it on FTX? I think it is. Like
he's
month.
Called a lot. Like over the last year, I'm just thinking like when ETH was over $4,000, he was telling people like you should just sell and chill. And then right after that, he was making a very big like 8-figure public bet that Luna was gonna go down. Yeah. And then like he covered it for like $1.
Yeah.
His like 10-figure short, he was able to cover all of it for like $1. Like, holy shit. But yeah, I know that if you just blindly followed him, if you just had a time machine, went back, sold some ETH at 4,000.
Yeah, just shadow his trades. Whatever this guy does, just do.
That's all you had to do. But it's crazy looking back where like, I remember people coming in the space who were just exposed to UST, and it was just like, oh yeah, I'm here because like I can get 20% of my savings. And it's so unfortunate, honestly, because that is their maybe first and last experience with this technology is like, oh, I was told this is like $1 that's going to give me 20%, and I sold it for like 5 cents.
Yeah, I think that crash set like the entire crypto industry back like years.
And I've talked to John Belinsky. He's actually does real estate in Manhattan. Okay. He's good. He's a good dude. He's one of the most, like, again, the space is packed with unrealistic people, and he's very realistic about the actual usefulness of crypto and NFTs. And he's progressive. Like I think he's done at least one sale just on crypto on Manhattan real estate.
Oh, nice.
So he's not anti-crypto at all. He's just realistic about it. And similar thing. It's I was on his space and we were discussing it, and I'm like, because everyone loves the notion of being self-regulated. I'm like, you guys have done a horrible job. The worst. Like, you're not even an F. You're like a Z-. Like, you've done as bad as you can possibly do. Like, you've had multi-$100 million scams and thieves or thefts go by. And you're just like, write it up to the game, charge it to the game. And I'm like,
self-regulated.
Why are you nuts?
We'll get them next time.
Yeah, right? Like, that's complete insanity. Yeah. I'm like, because the thing is, you will, I mean, it's already happened. I'm like, you will run out of other people's money, which they are. And you got a few, dirty as they may be, very clever scammers that made off with the lion's share of it. And they're hiding and on the run from Interpol, but they do have the money. So that's the 3 Arrows guys, right? They're still on the run.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how this whole dissolution, especially of their NFTs, goes. Like,
yeah, I haven't heard any updates there in a while. I have really no idea, but I know their NFTs are going to be sold relatively soon, which is, I think they spent like $100 million on their NFTs, and people are speculating now that they'll liquidate for like 10 million or something, which I think is too low. I actually think their NFTs are still worth a lot more. But it's probably the best performing thing in their portfolio.
It's better than the like 600 million that went into trying to save Luna a day before it crashed or whatever.
Yeah.
That going back to like things that interest you in the space that are legit, what are some of the more legitimate, not only use cases, but like actual applications and builders that you have your eyes on aside from all the scammers?
I mean, a lot of it's the obvious stuff, right? Like, I always use Uniswap as a. I'm like, there's an organization that built a truly useful tool. They open sourced everything, and I'll put an asterisk next to any statement I make. I don't have a full history of the entire crypto world, so I could be missing something. But as far as I know, I don't think they've ever been accused of any foul play.
No.
Right? So they provided a service that was needed. Everyone seems to like it, and they've made a fortune off of it, and they deserve it. I'm like, I see no problem with what they've done. They've played by the rules. They've played even by the ethos of Web3. And that's who I like, those types of companies. Who else? I like the ones that are making tie-ins with real world corporations. I know that there's the true believers that they want a completely independent crypto universe. And I'm like, you can't do it. Like, you've got to have a tie-in. I'm like, even if you're, you want to be the flame instead of the moth, but you do need to draw them in. Like, you have to create these relationships. And then after it's done, or during the process anyway, you need to show, here's why we're better than the current system. And they've done a terrible job of that. Terrible. Like, I mean, most people, again, going back to the figures, I don't know, there's 99%, but the majority of people that got into crypto probably lost money. And a few have done extraordinarily well, and those are the ones you always hear about. But it's like stock market. Like, you never hear about the guy that made a little bit. He made 18% over the course of his life, right? Or the guy that lost a little bit. You always hear the extremes. You hear about the one that made some crazy play and it paid off huge, or the guy that lost everything. Because that's make news. But there's far more people in the middle, right?
Well, think of like a normal distribution. It's you're only hearing the tails, and you're not hearing what happens to most people.
Right. But that's not what crypto doesn't advertise itself as, that, right? It's not, hey, come in and make mediocre returns. It doesn't do that, right? It's like, hey, come in and, get rich. And it generally doesn't happen that way. So, and then because there's the lack of regulation, there's no recourse for the people that do legitimately get ripped off. And that's, I don't know, it's weird because you even had Michael Saylor was even asking for regulation, right?
Yeah, we had Cuban after he lost some money in Iron Finance.
Yeah, on Titan. Right?
Yep, Titan.
Yeah.
Good old algorithmic stablecoin. He was immediately on Twitter like, yeah, we need regulation here. And it's like,
But I mean, even some of the true believers are at it now. I mean, and I don't even know that it's like, I don't even know who you're defending by saying that we don't. Like, all you're doing is letting the Do Kwons of the world run off with everybody's money. Like, how is that good? How is that part of the ethos?
Yeah, like a Zach XPT thread doesn't bring back any of the capital of the people who lost it.
And I should say, since you brought him up, I think Zach's an absolute
100%
credit to the industry. Like, he's popular, he's gaining popularity, deserves every bit of it. And I hope he's somehow able to make a living out of it, because he's very good at what he does.
I hope there's better mechanisms or like incentives in place for him to do what he does and not feel like, oh, if people don't send to this ETH address that's like 37 tweets after the start of the thread, then like I can't do this. Because it does feel like what he does is something that we need more of. And it's like, how do we have like a nouns prop house that like incentivizes people checking the chain and doing shit like that? Because it is something, if we are going to self-regulate ourselves, we need more people actually looking at the data that's there. I feel like right now the industry does a horrible job of looking at actually like on-chain data and
the tools aren't even that great, really. Like, it's unless you're technically savvy and you like looking at lines and lines and lines of numbers for hours and hours. But I mean, I don't know that there's that many good utilities to give you like a quick, hey, here's what I'm looking for. Give me a quick snapshot of what it is. Maybe it exists. I don't know about it.
I mean, I don't.
Nansen's really like
the
best, but yeah, even that, like, it's still limited. It's by far the best. And just from being a limited but by far the best thing, they're like $1 billion company. But there's still like so much more to do as far as like profiling wallets and tracking things and stuff. It's definitely a space that's like, I mean, it's really complicated too. Like my fiance does taxes for crypto people, and she's like, yeah. And so it's like she's finally figured out how to do like a lot of the ETH stuff, and she can generally decipher any typical kind of DeFi or NFT transaction on ETH. And then it's like, all right, time to figure it out for Solana and for Cosmos. And it's like, all right, well, you guys are fucked. I don't know.
The Solana tooling for trying to like the Solana block explorers. I can't even tell what's going on when I click like my transaction. I'm just like, what are all these other transactions in this list? Like, I didn't make any of these. Like, how are they in the transaction ID?
Yeah.
Goes back to me not understanding how the Solana tech works as well. Like, I know it's fast and that it's down like 20% of the time I try to use it.
Yeah, I don't know how to explain it. Like Solana on the surface sounds interesting. And then when I go to learn more about it, I get instantly bored and I don't know why. I can't figure out why. It shouldn't. Yeah, it's fast. I don't even, everyone likes to pull out the times that the chain stopped working.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's technical snags. Anyone in the tech industry is sympathetic to these things. But I don't know why. It just doesn't grab me like Ethereum. I don't know why. Maybe
is there do you how strongly do you feel about decentralization? Because I think like when I think of like Solana and ETH, the main things I think of is like, with ETH, you're way more decentralized, but your throughput's a lot less. And then in Solana, you're way more centralized, but your throughput is like, I don't know, 1000x plus or whatever.
I guess it's one of those things you don't care about it until you have a reason to care about it. So centralization's fine until the day they decide to shut the exchange off or sequester your funds or whatever they're going to do.
Have you had any of those experiences?
Early PayPal. Actually, maybe even now. Like PayPal, I wasn't doing anything sketchy at all. It was like me in my late teens, early 20s, just selling, because I used to upgrade my computer constantly, right? Because I was in IT and I was making good money. And I would definitely pay $1,000 for a 3% increase on my GPU, right?
It's benchmark stats.
Yeah,
I gotta get the screenshot out there on Hacker Forum.
Yeah.
And so what I would do is I would just, as I was, Frankensteining out my computer, I would sell the old parts on eBay. And I didn't even, the money I didn't really care about. So it just built up in the PayPal account, on and on and on. And then I got my next job, because that one was based on land. And my next job was the one where I traveled all the time. So I don't remember exactly what triggered it. I don't think it's because I had accessed it from a computer in another country or whatever. It freezed my account. It took me a year to get the money out. And it wasn't even that much. It was like $2,000, $3,000, but I was like, give me my money, PayPal. And they're like, oh no, you have to send, and the requirements back then were absurd. It was like, you have to have this thing printed out and signed by a notary public.
Oh my God.
At your bank. And they're like, you have to have copies of bank statements. It was that level of crazy. And I did it to get my money, and I just swore off PayPal. I haven't used them since. I'm like, you scumbags, I'll never use you again. And now, maybe they're good now. I really don't know, but that's the only thing I've ever had.
I still get nervous when I use it. I feel like I've seen this trend in Lebanon recently where people are holding up banks and keeping hostages to get money out of the bank. Like this one guy, I read a story, he held up the bank because his dad needed life-saving surgery, and he couldn't pay for it with the cash that they would give him. And they were only going to give him I've been making these numbers up, but he might have needed $50,000.
Yeah. I know the case you're talking
about. The bank is we only have $2,500. Yeah. And he literally held up the bank for hours and then got his money. So I think.
And it was his actual, the money in his bank.
It was his money. It would be like if you had $100,000 in your bank and you need $50,000 to save your dad. And then the bank was like, yeah, we can only give you $2,500. And you're like, my dad is going to fucking die. You're going to die right now if you don't give me the money, or my dad is going to die. And that's a super serious scenario. And I've seen another Lebanon scenario where a woman held people hostage at a bank to do the same thing. And it's I think in America, we might be a little more isolated from those type of things. I haven't went to Huntington or Chase or Wells Fargo and been oh, I can't take my money out. But it's something that outside of these established countries, I think is a really real thing. Yeah, and also currency debasement. Oh, look at Argentina, with their massive inflation, and they did the same. They froze people's accounts. So it's absolutely a real thing. U.S. to its credit has put in a lot of safeguards against this. That's why you have the FDIC insurance and things like that. And I don't know that there is any 100% safe system, but I like our system better. No, our system feels safe. I can at least feel like I have the money and can move it. Well, but the only thing I was going to buy a sport bike once, and I needed $10,000 for my account, which I had plenty in there.
And it would just shock me because I didn't understand fully how banks work. Again, I was in my early 20s. What do I know? Mid-20s, actually, I guess, for this part. But, and it was one of the ones that eventually got bundled into Bank of America. So it wasn't a small bank. It was Nations Bank. I don't know if you remember that, but Nations Bank.
It rings a bell.
Yeah.
But it was a fairly large bank. It was one of the largest in the country before they merged with Bank of America, if I'm remembering the merger correctly. And I just went there thinking I could pull out $10,000 because why not? I had
It's your money.
Yeah. And they're like, yeah, sorry, we don't have that on hand. I'm like, you don't have 10 grand on hand.
You're
And
a bank.
this was a big city. I lived in Miami at the time. So I'm like, 10 grand? You don't have 10 grand. And they're like, yeah, you have to schedule it. Like, you got to be kidding me. And they're like, no, we have to call ahead, and then the Brinks truck will deliver, that much above what our normal whatever is. I'm like, all right. So, I mean, they did. I had to come back the next day, but that just blew me away. I was like, you don't have 10 grand? All right. Like, if I'd asked for $1 million, fine, I understand, but
Like 10 grand?
grand?
You're like,
Yeah, that's funny. I feel like I've had so many issues with wiring money as well, where it's like you got to pull their teeth out in order to get them to wire. I mean, I've Ally Bank, which is probably not the best bank in the world.
oh my goodness.
dude, I'll post it in chat later. I'll show you my transaction records because when I was trying to make my first, like, not even big purchase, but reasonably sizable purchase in crypto.
Mm-hmm.
It took me days to get the money across. And these were rejections from, I have two main banks. I have TD Ameritrade account. Like, I was trying wires from all of these. And it was a Coinbase, which is,
Yeah.
they follow like SEC regulations. They're
Yeah.
one of the,
They're a publicly traded company.
Yes.
For fuck's sake.
and I'll post it in chat because it defies belief. I must have gotten rejected 70 times from all these different ones. And I'm like, why are you? And I eventually wound up on a phone call with the guy. And I'm like, why are you stopping these? Like, I've gone over the paperwork, and this was the third dude I talked to. I'm like, everything here is correct. And for his credit, he was actually a really nice guy. And he goes, yeah, he's like, the problem is, because I guess the way Coinbase does it is Coinbase has a bank account, a U.S. bank account that isn't Coinbase. You deposit the money into, and if anybody from Coinbase out there is listening and I'm getting this wrong, feel free to correct me. But
correct us.
But it goes into there, and then your name is on the transfer. They take it out of this one sort of pooled bank account, U.S. bank account, and then take the amount that you transferred out of the account and put it into your Coinbase account. And that's, sure, it adds maybe an extra step, but that still seems fairly simple.
Yeah.
And what the guy said, he goes, the problem is that Coinbase changed their protocol. And he goes, and I'm like, this is the published protocol. I'm like, and I gave him the link. I'm like, go to Coinbase's page. This is what they say about wiring instructions. And he goes, I know. He's like, we get it. He's like, it's just that if this goes wrong, it goes very wrong, and we're liable. And I'm like, I get it, but I want my money. So
It sounds similar to how FTX works. That's the only big wires I've done is to FTX US, but you send it to some bank that is clearly not an FTX thing, and then you have to put that beneficiary field.
exactly, yes.
The right shit. And if you don't, like me, they send you the money back. You get it back in your bank account a couple of days later, and you're like, oh, I must have messed something up. But it was one of those things to me where, like, doing my first wire, I was buying a house, and it kind of made me realize, like, well, this feels a lot like sending a transaction. I have a number that's on a piece of paper that the bank teller is manually typing into the number pad onto his screen, and then he's printing it out and handing it to me so that I can compare it to my piece of paper and make sure that what he typed is the same thing on my piece of paper. But then it takes, like, over a day to clear. And I'm like, I could have just did this on chain in like 30 seconds, made the same check, and it would have been sent. And it was like, okay, like, I definitely, before that, I hadn't had the friction in the banking industry. Like, I was a student, lived in an apartment. My debit card had like a $400 max. So I was just like, never needed more. And then getting into the crypto space was like, wow, like, these banks suck and they're slow, and like, I can't just send our house down payment in USDC like this. Like, I need to, like, go to this. It was a whole, but it enlightened me in this sense that, like, I didn't see that process before. And then the whole home buying process where you're like sitting there signing your life away. You're not even reading anything you're signing. And it's just a stacked paper like this big, and there's like a witness at the table and another person, and you're like, what are we doing? Like, this feels crazy. And then like apparently that lives maybe at like a record center in paper in my city. Like, what is going on? Anyway, sorry, that was kind of a long thing to let me segue back into saying that, like, I realize there are a lot of efficiencies to be gained with this new technology, even though we might not be using it right now.
There are. But even if so let's say that's like the theoretically lowest risk approach to crypto, where I'm just going to convert into USDC, right? I'm just going to take my fiat and I'm going to get an equal amount, minus whatever the exchange fee is, whatever, in the USDC. Even some of the stuff like, and again, I'm looking at it from a user standpoint, because a lot of what I've done over my career involves user experience, where it's like, how are the users going to take this system? And the average user doesn't have the first clue what to do with a wallet. Like, that needs to be simplified down to the lowest common denominator possible. And then there's things like, if I accidentally send to the wrong wallet, there's no way to get the money back. Like, there's things like that have to be addressed.
Yeah.
I should say, like, all of the negativity is to point out that there's still way, way, way more money out there that can be moved into this space. But until you take care of the scamming and the ease of use issues and all the other things, it's just not going to come, right? You've basically got the adventurous money right now, some of the forward-looking people, but the whole crypto market represents what, 2% of the world's free cash reserve, something like that. Non-derivatives, I guess, is the correct way to look at it. But,
yeah.
In that respect, if they can clean the space up and make it attractive, the meme becomes true. You are so early. Like if you can make it better than all the other things that are out there, there's a tremendous. I think free currency is what, like $2 quadrillion, something like that. It's some absurd amount of money.
Very big number, whatever it is.
How do you feel about central bank digital currencies versus something like USDC, or even something quote unquote decentralized like DAI?
I'm pretty okay with it. Like, you couldn't. Well, look at it this way. Even if a government wants to do it, you can't exclude them, right? Like, they can just do it themselves. Like even following the original ethos of blockchain, you literally can't stop them. No. So if they're going to do it, fine. But again, there's got to be. It's one of these things. You got to remember, a very, very, very large percentage. And philosophically, I should preface this by saying I don't agree with this, but this is still true. A huge amount of the power that governments wield is their control over the currency. Like, it's a tremendous amount. And you're telling governments, some of which are the most powerful on the planet ever, hey, by the way, we're going to pull your teeth out. And and you think they're going to be okay with it. They're not. Like, they just aren't. They're willing to let a little bit go because it's probably just not worth the fight at this point. But if you're ever at the point where you're in for a ride, like, they can do a lot of things that people don't seem to think they can do. Yeah. Look what they did with their tornado cash. They folded like that. They wrecked it with a tweet. Like, it wasn't even like, oh, we're going to send the Virginia farm boys to your data center and whatever. It was literally one tweet from the Treasury Secretary, and tornado crashed 30% instantly, almost instantly. And I haven't checked it recently, but last time I checked, it was down 2/3.
Yeah, I don't know who's buying it right now. I'm
not sure who the marginal buyer of tornado cash is.
I feel bad for them.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, all they did was like, oh, by the way, if you use tornado, you're literally a terrorist, like legally a terrorist.
Yeah.
And that's all they had to do. Yeah. And they wrecked it.
I think it's an inevitability that there will be a central bank digital currency from the U.S. or
probably.
I don't know when it will be, but like, in terms of tracking, in terms of like keeping, I feel like digital eyes on everything, it's way better than cash. Like, everything you're paying cash for, they aren't getting taxes on, maybe. They're not tracking where it's going. It's like, it seems like they're going to want to have control over it. They're not just going to let us fuck around and be like, oh, we have our own dollar. They're going to be like, no, like, we have missiles and
and aircraft carriers.
Literally a military.
And smart viruses.
Yeah, it's great that your dollar's backed by Ethereum. Ours is backed by an army.
Yeah, and it's like I think it's Peter Zian. I forget how to pronounce his last name, but he's someone who talks a lot about like American muscle and military and how in the global game how America is situated, and it all goes back to like what you just said about the dollar and the military. It's something I think a lot of people in this space are too idealistic or too
They are
Naive too.
yeah, they're naive, idealistic, and they like live in some weird euphoric land that is not pragmatic in any sense, it seems like.
Well, for what it's worth, I actually agree with the philosophy. I get it. People should have control over their money. You should be able to exclude it, especially from corrupt governments, right? Like if you are a citizen of Zimbabwe or Nigeria or Argentina or
Turkey,
whatever,
yeah.
where they have regular financial panics, and you're losing everything that you've worked your life for, who can with a straight face argue against that, right? That's a clearly better way to do it. But when you get to countries like the UK and the US and Australia, some of the more stable ones, it becomes a lot blurrier. And then when you start looking at the fact that at its, if you turn the volume knob all the way to the right, where this is a full takeover of the world's financial system, they are not going to let that happen. Like, it's just not going to happen. I mean, the best you'll come up with is some sort of negotiated middle ground where they still maintain a level of control that they want, and you get some of the stuff that you want. I wish it wasn't. Again, I'm philosophically on the crypto side when it comes to this, but I also know government behavior too well to think it would go any other way.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. So what do you, I guess now a bit forward looking as you're continuing to learn more about the space and stuff, is there anything that you either haven't spent a lot of time with that you do want to spend more time with? And if not that, I guess like just things you're looking forward to or thinking about kind of over the next couple of years where it seems like kind of entire macroeconomic situation is pretty tumultuous?
Again, I look for the real utility. Like, what can you do in crypto that you can't do in the non-crypto world? What are some of the benefits of that? The stuff I'm focusing on now is digital asset ownership, which I think is unique, at least currently, to the NFT or to the crypto world. So I've always been a big gamer, always heavily into it. And I mean, everyone who plays games knows, one of the I wouldn't even say recent, it's been going on for 12, 15 years now. Revenue streams has been selling people in-game items. And so you get a skin or a weapon or a mount or whatever it is. And that's great until they decide to kick you off the platform because you said a mean word, in chat or whatever. And all the stuff you bought, they keep it. They're tough. We're going to delete your account and the $1,000 or whatever you spent.
Make a new one and buy it back.
No, exactly.
You won't.
No.
We know you will.
I mean, I will, but
Thank you, Riot.
But I'm not going to admit it because my pride stops me. I'm going to do it under different names so nobody knows.
I can't say it's happened personally to me where I've gotten banned and rebought the same skins, but yeah, no, I feel you.
So that I think is unique.
Yeah.
And so the idea would be you come up with some sort of standardized interface to video games that support NFTs. And you're like, I'll buy your stuff, but only if it's in the form of an NFT. And then, I buy whatever, I connect my wallet to your thing. And you're like, okay, I see your inventory and I support, whatever the particular graphic model is. And okay, I get to wear all my stuff in the game. And then doesn't matter what you do, even if you kick me out of the game, close my account, you shut the servers off. I just get my stuff's still in my wallet. So I don't really care. I think that has real world value.
Yeah. I think
that's
like
what
I'm also a really big gamer. And so we'll have to talk about PC setups and all that some other time. I've been making my own PCs for a while too. It's a lot of fun. But that was always to me like the lowest hanging fruit. And we've seen so much with like the crypto gaming stuff and like play to earn and all of that. And to me, like, I always just feel like, what if someone just did like Riot games, but the skins were NFTs? Like, to me, that like makes way more sense than all these crazy like play to earn economic models and all of that. And it's just such an obvious use case that would
play to earn. I just don't
really
even get. Like, I don't know what, like, okay, I'm playing the game. What am I doing to earn you money? Like, none of that makes sense. Unless it's like unless they're just doing it to build a crowd, because nothing attracts a crowd like a crowd. So it's like, hey, we'll pay some to get it in, and everyone will say, oh, look how popular this game is. And then the paying players start to play. Maybe that's the logic.
Then it always dies. Like I think like Axie is the one where it's like you can only sustain the new players coming in for so long until that model just feels like shit.
Or your bridge gets attacked and $600 million
and you don't
disappears.
Notice for wasn't it like over a day?
I think it was like a week.
They didn't notice for a while. Like it wasn't like they had within 5 minutes, we've been breached. It's like, a couple days ago, we may have misplaced like 9 figures.
Whoopsie.
We did a little whoops. But like, I feel like with Axie, and then I think of, just trying to think like back over the last year, what was the other play to earn? Like Zedrun's not play to earn.
No.
It's more like.
They more had issues, I think, because of the gambling side of things than anything else. I don't think there were any other massive. There was like a couple other play to earn games that had like waves and had
like
moments.
I don't count like DeFi Kingdom or like Magic. Like DeFi Kingdom felt like they just took DeFi concepts and abstracted it to like I don't want to say shitty, but like a not great front end, and was like, oh, you're not staking or yield farming. You're now just like farming crops in the game. And
I actually was like pretty bullish on that idea in general of like, how do you bring DeFi to the masses? And probably one of the easiest ways is through like a Farmville-like experience. Yeah. They just didn't
execute at the right level. Yeah. But I feel like with gaming right now, the only thing I'm really paying attention to still is Parallel. I'm paying attention to Xpopulous because I'm an advisor with Sobi. And I'm really just looking at what Fwiz does from Polygon. I don't know if you know him, but head of YouTube gaming coming over. I feel like his biz dev role really just like allows them to partner with a ton of different games. And I'm thinking, just from an adoption standpoint, gaming is the way that we get the next million users. Like a million people don't give a fuck about DeFi.
Yeah.
A million people probably don't give a fuck about art. I mean,
oh yeah. So
like actually like owning art to collect art and not like owning art to maybe flip it for a 10x in a week. So it's like gaming, there's definitely millions of people who care. And also it's like they don't have access to their items right now, like you mentioned. Yeah. And I feel like that's a no-brainer. But like, are you paying attention to Parallel or any of these other?
A bit. Like I see, like whenever they pair up with somebody, Parallel is one of the companies that I follow. And forgive me, I still call them companies instead of DAOs. And I think some actually are, right? Some are actually incorporated, so they technically are companies. Yeah. While some are DAOs. So use those terms interchangeably. If I'm saying company and it's wrong, pretend I said DAO and
it's
vice
an organization.
Versa. Yeah, it's an organization. I mean, it's a better blanket term. Paradigm, I follow. They're making some interesting moves.
Have you been following art gobblers?
But have you noticed how many start with P? Like,
yeah, too many.
It's way too many. And they, for whatever reason, the letter P seems to be good luck because a lot of the ones that start with P tend to be doing very,
is that
very
one
well.
of our baseline like variables?
It is.
We're investing if it starts with
Does
P.
it start with the letter P? Because otherwise, get it out of my face.
10% chance success rate added. To
it's
any
like the blue coins in DeFi when everyone needed their tokens to be blue.
Another blue one.
I think for another use case scenario for NFTs, so going back to your comment about art. So if you look at the real art world, here's the novelty of art. And I'm assuming that this theoretical person is not an actual collector and they're not buying, you can't buy the Mona Lisa, but even if you could buy the Mona Lisa, we'll use that as an example. Let's say the cost was $1 billion, right? You would have a lot of trouble rationalizing that thing being worth $1 billion, right? Makes perfect sense to the person buying it, right? They have no trouble with it. If I'm an art aficionado and I can afford this, I'm definitely buying the Mona Lisa for $1 billion.
I'm buying it for $1 billion.
But one of the nice things about art, and which has attracted a lot of non-art aficionados, is it's a great value store if you buy the right thing. And I wouldn't say it's immune to broader market trends, but it seems to be more immune, especially when you get to the absolute top tier. So King Salman, the new Saudi, not new, but newish Saudi king, bought what they think is a Da Vinci painting of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
They're not even sure. Like, teams of experts have been working on it for years trying to definitively say
make sure.
this is. And he paid almost $500 million for it. He paid $400 million, $450 million, something like that. And did he do it because he actually really, really likes Jesus? Or is he a big art fan? Or is it because, well, here's the thing, I can just dump a bunch of money into and I don't have to worry about it anymore.
Take loans out against it.
Yeah. And so from the NFT, because NFTs behave similarly, right? You'll have, that's one of the most surprising things I found, because I saw all the headlines everybody else saw before I got in, which is, why would you pay $100,000 for a JPEG? And
right-click, save it.
Idiously gets dismissed as that. So I'm like, I was, again, not as bearish as the general public. I was like, well, it doesn't exactly work like that. I'm like, and I would use, a Monet or a Rembrandt or a Mona Lisa example. I'm like, it's the difference between the actual Mona Lisa and a perfect copy of the Mona Lisa. One just has a lot more value, and everyone seems to understand that. And you can always go down the list until you find something that's important to them. Like, well, what's the difference between a real Cobra and a knockoff kit car Cobra? Like, it's $1 million versus $80,000. Like, it's a huge difference, right? And I'm like, and the kit car probably performs better, but none of that matters in the collector space. And that's what I think. I actually wrote one of my papers for business school on this, was that this new generation is going to have an appreciation for digital assets that simply doesn't exist in older generations.
100%.
And I'm like, and it's, the thing is, like, my great-great-grandparents probably thought that their grandson saving baseball cards was a moron, right? Like, why would you save these things? This is just something that's in a 5-cent pack of gum, and you got it covered in wax paper and stuffed under your bed and whatever.
And it was Ionis Wagner.
Yeah. And
Mickey
it's
Mantle.
number one. It's a Honus Wagner rookie card, right? But again, I don't know that resonates with the younger. It doesn't resonate with me at all. I don't begrudge anybody their passions. If you want to collect baseball cards, knock yourself out. But I don't personally get it. Like, I'd look at it and I'd be like, okay, I guess I'll flip it and sell it for $6 million, but I'm not keeping it. It doesn't mean that much to me. And I think you're going to see that. You're not even going to. You're seeing that in the digital space. And that's one of the other novelties of NFTs, where you can say, sure, you have a copy of the original, but I actually own the original. And logical or not, it's very real, right? Like, the it either is directly or it's very closely related to the appreciation for art. So somebody has a unique, say, Beeple, because he's one of the bigger ones in the space.
For sure.
I got the one. Sure, you've got, there's 1 million copies out there, but I've got the actual first in series. That means something to them, and they're willing to pay for it. So yeah, I've actually never had too much cognitive dissonance over valuing NFTs in that respect. Having said that, the vast majority of the NFTs do not in any way fairly fall under the art umbrella, right? It's
99% are not art.
Right. There's some that are legitimately beautiful. And then beyond the art thing, where I think the utility is going to come in, if you just view it as art, it's a value store, you got two groups for that. But it's NFTs as a utility, where it becomes like your online persona. Because can't, for one, I've got practically name blindness. I'm very bad at remembering people's names, but I have a crazy good memory for faces and images. So I'm scrolling through whatever. 99% of the time, I'm not looking at the name. I'm looking at whatever the PFP is. And so if it's unique to that person, I'll know, oh, that's whoever. And then, so you'll have that, which could be tied to an NFT or is an NFT. Some of the NFT organizations are building in like VTube functionality. So you get the NFT and you also get this thing that plugs in and you get to be your NFT on VTube.
Yeah. Shout out to Anata. They gave us a honorary.
We have a half Andy, half D's VTube from Anata. So it's like half of our traits.
Yeah.
It's really funny.
Oh, is it like a 50% morph or like,
no,
or
it's
no,
kind of like combined into one person. Like,
yeah, and so like Deez has a couple like key traits. He has like a punk that has 3D glasses and a pipe and a hoodie.
Right. Yeah,
but then
that
you have like,
and see, that's how I know you. Like
my face. No one knows the face. Like when they're watching the recording, it's gonna be my punk over my head. It's gonna be are you dark magician? What? What's your avatar?
It's an Anata actually. It's
why did I think it's Dark Magician? Like,
It does kind of look like Dark Magician.
it does?
Oh, does
Okay.
it?
Yeah.
Oh, but
it could have been based on that. I don't know. We'd have to ask DCF or Big D. But
yeah, but shout out to Hologram Labs building the
And,
extension that allows us to do this with like a ton of different projects as well. I think like we've even talked about VTubing for this podcast. Like, what does it look like if an Anata like on the thing? Like, I don't know.
But yeah, it is crazy like how much engagement changes on Twitter when you change away from your default like profile picture. Like I definitely have that where if I'm my Punk or my Lorona boy, which are like the two that I'll go between the most often, I get a lot more engagement than if I change to like some random NFT that I was given or that I bought. It's kind of ridiculous like how much it influences stuff like that.
No, for sure. I've noticed it too, and I switch off the Punk, even to like derivatives of the Punk. It's like less than the Punk.
yeah. It's whatever. It's how the brains are wired, right? It's it's like at a glance, like, oh, that's that person, you know. And so I think again, groups like Anata, who are building functionality into it, they can justify a higher price because you're getting utility along with it. It's like, cool, I get a custom PFP, I get whatever the NFT was itself, I get something that I can do VTubing motion tracking with, and now they're working on a full 3D thing that's going to get, I mean, presumably it's going to get integrated into video games and metaverses, so you can actually be the NFT, and you know, as you're walking around, it's you. That I think has value. I think the hey, here's a JPEG trend is going to go away.
Yeah. I would be curious about art in terms of like time scale and provenance. Like in like 25 years, are people just going to look back and be like, oh, this was minted in like 2018? Like that. Is that the equivalent of like, oh, this was, you know, painted with when Da Vinci was alive? Like when you scale out not only at the end of our life, but going on to future generations, like how does that look? Because a lot of times I find artists, they don't sell something in like a week or a couple of weeks. Like they want to burn something or get rid of it. And I'm like, I would just keep that out there forever because in the length of history, you're still pretty damn early. It is all on chain. You can prove, hey, this person was so-and-so. And a lot of artists from my research, they don't become famous till they die, as sad as that is. Like, and I think blockchain helps change that and give people a little more attention and actual wealth while they're alive. But I think like looking generations down the line, a lot of people are underestimating the provenance part of just being early, having mints on chain. And even if it doesn't sell this year, it's like you're still early in the grand scheme of things, and it's stamped. It's not like you have to in 50 years say like, no, I was alive and made this then. It's like, no, I stamped it and it's there.
So going back to, again, I've read and memorized the Web3 principles. So like, assuming that there are still people there that actually believe in them.
Yeah.
And again, I think this is completely fair. I think it's, you know, historically it's very unjust that these great artists often live their lives dirt poor just for people to make millions off of their work when they die. It's completely unfair. So being reasonable about it, part of the reason these things go up is due to financial speculation. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Not everybody buys art because they're aficionados. They do it because they expect it to either hold value better than some other traditional financial instrument, or they expect it to increase in value. And that is what drives up a lot of them, right? Like if that community didn't exist, that the Da Vinci wouldn't have sold for 450 million, right? Like it just wouldn't have. It still would have been valuable to some degree.
But no one appreciates the art at that level. Yeah.
Not really. And unless you just happen to have a multi-billionaire who just really likes art. You know, that's the only people that can afford it at that point. It also means that the blockchain has to be alive, right? Like to be able to prove it to future generations, that thing can never die. So it's whereas if it's the Mona Lisa, you got other ways to prove that it's the original. You can look at all sorts of things, you know, the specific paint. I mean, they've got these things, the really high end stuff. They've got down to like which direction the brush was traveling at a certain point on the canvas. You know, like, I
mean, I just imagine they're like swabbing it, doing some carbon dating, and just being like, yeah, this is verifiably 500 plus years old, whatever. Like,
sure, they do all that stuff because again, when you're dealing with amounts of money this large, people want to make sure they're actually getting what they're paying for. So here's an interesting. It goes back to your statement about stuff that doesn't sell immediately or that sells low, and they're like, "Oh, let me just get rid of this stuff." there could even be a time component to it, right? Because maybe their collection will get popular a year, 5 years, 10 years from now, and suddenly all that stuff is valuable. Look at what they pay for literally scratch notes from famous novelists, right?
Yeah.
Where it's not an anything. It's a
sketches from Picasso even.
Yeah. Where it was probably to them, it was a nothing. It's like, I'm just going to write this to get some of the ideas straight in my head, and then I'm going to cast to the side. It's $1 million now. So that could be the equivalent of the lower popularity NFTs. A more recent example would be Beanie Babies. So I don't know how familiar, I mean, everyone's heard of Beanie Babies, but I don't know how familiar you or the listeners are with the reason they got so popular. So Beanie Babies started out like any other plush toy company. Then there was just this sequence of events that led into them becoming a supposed collector's item, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for years, crazy money was being spent on these things, right? And eventually it crashed towards the end of the 90s. The whole Beanie Baby market, everyone just lost interest and whatever. And that's sort of where the story ends in most people's heads, right? And if you read a story to this day, that's where it ends. What no one follows is there is an actual collector's market now. Like, it did eventually spring up. It didn't do it in the 90s. It took some time. But I think the most expensive Beanie Baby you can get now was the Princess Diana commemorative bear. It's $500,000 for one that's in perfect condition.
That's news to me.
Yeah, and it's go on down the list. Like, I don't remember all of them, but the top, say, 30 Beanie Babies are all selling somewhere between the hundreds of thousands of dollars to over $1,000. So it did eventually actually become a collector's market. It's just that everybody lost interest, and that's again, it's part of the human condition. We pay attention to like the juiciest part of the story, and then we're on with life. Maybe we have to do that, right? You can't pay attention to everything forever. But if you tracked Beanie Babies over the next 2 decades, a percentage of them did become very, very valuable collector's items. And that's where we're at today. So
that's really interesting. Today I learned I'll have to do some Beanie Baby research. But I think we are just about coming up on time here. Thank you so much for coming on and doing this, especially in such short notice. But we do have one question that we've kind of decided that we're going to ask everyone.
All right.
Kind of on their way out. And so it's, and geez, if I butcher this, let me know. It's been a little bit now. If you were to write an autobiography kind of about your life up until this point, what would you title it?
Don't live life like I did. Not because it turned out bad. It's just, I just got very lucky. It was a very high risk life, and I just won a lot of coin tosses in a row. But I would not recommend my life to anybody.
I love it.
There we go. Great. Do you have anything you want to shout out or shill before we?
No, I just want to thank you guys. This was a lot of fun. I was coming into New York for some budget meetings that are going to last all week, and this was a pleasant distraction. So,
no, I'm so thankful that you were like, yeah, I'm in. Because we were, backstory, we're sitting here, we're ready. Text our first guest. He's like, oh my God, I'm not going to make it. And we're like, oh shit, like we can just talk with us or talk with Weish. And apparently it was like 5 minutes later, you're like, I'm coming to Penn Station. We're like, oh shit, like even better. So thank you again, just coming on a last minute notice. I love this conversation. I didn't know where it was going to go. I really like going into disciplines outside of crypto that people are interested in. So like going down the biochem rabbit hole, and you're past a bit. Really insightful. I appreciate you just coming on and vibing with us.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, bye everyone. See you soon.
Bye everyone.